I had student loans from grad school. I had probably almost $60,000 to $80,000 worth of student debt. I knew obviously going into it that I would have student debt. And honestly, my major objective coming out was to get the most highest paying job I could possibly find so that, and I guess this is a little bit from a female perspective, like I wanted to know that when I was ready to have children that I could just go and do that when it was my time. So I spent 3 hard years in investment banking paying off my student debt, which is a very fast-paced piece, and I was living in New York in an investment banking salary, so it's kind of a little bit different. But when you think about like strategies to pay off your student debt, you can think of it, one, you should think about the opportunity to potentially prepay your student debt. So when you look at your debt, there should be, generally you may have 2 different loans, one that has maybe an interest rate that's around 6.8% in the 7s, and then you may have someone that's a little bit around 4. So are people familiar with the concept of loans and that loans generally have a principal and an interest piece of a loan? Okay, so your principal is like the original amount that you took out. So for me, it would have been let's say $80,000 to go to Carnegie Mellon. And then in addition, you generally have some sort of interest payment that starts accumulating once you graduate. The higher the interest, obviously then the amount of loans that you have grows and grows. So you can have a strategy of trying to pay off the principal as fast as possible. And so you can, for example, what I did at the time was I would not only make my monthly payment, but I would take the highest interest loan, and you want to start with the highest interest loan, as well as like if you have any credit card debt that's like the credit card interest rates tend to be really high as well. You should look at any debt you have, determine what has the highest interest rate, and start to pay off. Obviously, continue to pay your monthly payments for everything else that you have, but really start to attack the areas that have the highest interest rate possible. You can look at the possibility of consolidating your student loans. Generally, what's going to happen though is if you have something that's 6.8 and 3.4, it's going to kind of start to actually work against you because it's going to kind of come somewhere in the middle, where if you have the opportunity to prepay, like you no longer are kind of hitting it as well as possible. So there's prepayment. You can potentially consolidate your debt. For people that are really concerned that you're just not able to make your student loans, and this is really, you should really do this after you've looked at the possibility of budgeting, making sure that you have, put up your personal finances affairs in a way that are as low as they possibly can. Then you can always, there's options with loans that you can start to extend out your student loan payments. So the government really wants you to be able to pay back your student loans. I don't recommend that in general. Like you should really be able to try to pay them off as quickly as possible. That would be does that answer your question?
Any other panelists want to comment?
I don't have anything to add.
One thing I'd say is as you're getting your financial house in order, many employers, most employers these days have employee savings plans with so-called 401ks, and they will typically offer you matching funds if you contribute to your 401k plan. My company, for example, will match anything I put in up to 6% with their 6%. So you should make sure that the first thing you do is to take advantage of that free money that the company is giving you, and then attack your debt with the highest interest rate first, and then working your way down.
As well as making sure, I would also think one of the first things you need to do when you graduate is to establish an emergency fund. I generally tell clients you should have 3 to 6 months of, you can make rent, if you have a car payment, you can make things that you need to do. And that should be also something that you work towards in the very beginning. And honestly, I remember sitting in your chair and I remember graduating and feeling like I had absolutely no money whatsoever. I remember going to Walmart and feeling like I couldn't buy a spatula, because I had nothing. I remember just barely being able to make it in the beginning. And I looked at all my friends and they were all buying really great cars and really great everything. And my father kept lecturing me. And at the time, I really didn't know anything about finance. I didn't know what beta was. Where I am now is very different than where I was at that moment. And my father kept lecturing me about really watching my money. And he said, when you want to, you'll be able to do what you want later. And it took me, I had worked in engineering for 3 years and realized I had no desire to do this. And I went back to school, but because I had really listened to my father, who yelled at me over and over again about saving money, it meant that when it was my time to go, I could go to whatever school I wanted to. I could make the decisions that I wanted, which was so much more freedom. And my friends that like had bought houses or bought crazy expensive cars, they just were like so bogged down. And I really cannot stress enough, like if you budget yourself appropriately, like you will have the ability to kind of start to like get out of this feeling of I have no money, I can't buy a spatula. And the other thing in regards to your retirement plan, generally your company should have some form of education option. And so someone will literally sit down with you and kind of give you some guidance overall. So definitely reach out because it's free advice. And you know, they're more than happy to help you.
Just one thing to point out on the 401k plans, as Brian had mentioned, when you think about that, where your company is matching how much you save, there's no better investment
Yes.
than it's 100% return.
As well as like it's like a tax deferral too.
It's a great tax deferral. It may be difficult at first, as Liz said, to set that money aside because you really have a lot of other things you would like to do. But I think all four of us would say in the long run, and that's what you really have to look at, the long-term plan, that will put you in the best position, both when you're starting a family, middle age, and when it comes to retirement, which, believe it or not, gets here sooner than you think.
I'll also add into that, you know, especially what Liz was saying about budgeting and all that kind of stuff. I mean, obviously you should have a budget and you should make good financial decisions. You should try to make good financial decisions from day one after graduation. And what kind of sucks about it is when you make those good financial decisions and you don't buy the nice car, or you don't go out to the nicest restaurants, or you don't get the most expensive drinks when you go out to the bar with your friends, it kind of hurts in the moment, right? You know, it feels like your friends are living high on the hog, and that is great and wonderful. What I will tell you though is if you're diligent with your finances and you watch and you follow what your father had said, you make good financial decisions over time, you really start to notice the effects of those financial decisions, the cumulative effects of those little decisions that you've made after some number of years. I graduated in 2009, so I'm about 8 years after graduation for me at this point in time. And I can tell you that I've been diligent with my money. My wife was diligent with her money. We budget together every couple months. We go through our budget and make sure that we're still on track. And it affords us a bunch of opportunities that we would never be able to do if we weren't good with our money over time. And it's opportunities that some of our friends don't have because they made different decisions because of different priorities, buying that expensive car, buying the most expensive drinks at the bar. And just that's an aside. I feel like we're maybe getting off the rails a little bit from debt repayment, but just general good financial advice. It is a cumulative effect.
While we're talking about buying that new car, the very last chart here, a series of handouts from Edmunds, who are the authority on new and used cars. You can see that if you buy a brand new car, the minute you drive it off the lot, you have lost 9% of your investment. And in fact, over 4 years, you lose progressively up to 51% of the new value of that car. So new cars are a bad investment. I haven't bought a new car since I worked for the chief economist at Mobil. I buy my cars 3-4 years old. Cars these days are built to last at least 100,000 miles. So if you get a good car from Japan, Germany, they will last, and you will save significantly, because this is one of those expenses that loses value quickly over time.
I think the easiest way to make smart financial decisions is if you look at your big purchases, which is going to be your rent, like your car payment, and really make sure that only takes up a piece of the pie. Trying to like really cut down on discretionary income can be really, really difficult. But making sure that you only have X amount of rent a month, like that's something that's really easy to control from the start. And once you are in that mindset of this is how much I'm spending, like meaning like you pay yourself, like what we called about like paying yourself first, but like making sure you're investing in your 401k, paying off your student loans, like it just makes it so much easier to continue to make sure that you continue to do that. And there will never be a point in your life where you feel like you don't need money. Like you can go across this whole panel, and we're all going to tell you about what's happening right now in our life, about why we're saving for money or why we're doing X, Y, and Z. Like you may feel really, really poor right now, but like that feeling of making sure that you're budgeting appropriately, really, there will never be a time where you have an exorbitant amount of money. Hopefully, I don't know, maybe you will.